Hello everyone, TheMrTrails here, and I have a question for you. Should Dauntless want power creep? Power creep in video games is generally considered to be a negative thing. However, there are certain games that are basically defined by their power creep. There are, of course, certain things that have been power crept in Dauntless, but we should take a look at whether or not the phenomenon as a whole should be seen as a positive for the game. Drop a like for me, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And new stuff alert over at TheMrTrails.store. The classic Dauntless Pumpkinhead transmog can now be yours on a t-shirt, hoodie, or crew neck, just in time for this year's Dark Harvest. And you could save 10% right now at launch with using code PC10 at checkout. You can use code PC10 for 10% off anything in the store until October 12th. So channel your inner Pumpkinhead today. So let's first talk about power creep in general and then kind of relate it to how Dauntless might benefit from it. Power creep is essentially the idea that with each coming update to a game, there will be stronger and stronger content released. And over time, this would lead to the content of the newest era being vastly superior and stronger to the content of the older eras. The term originated in tabletop games such as D&D and trading card games, with Yu-Gi-Oh!, a trading card game and anime series that deeply defined my childhood, being one of the prime examples of power creep. Back in the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the game was fairly simple and straightforward. You would bring out a monster card by using the normal summon, and you would only get one of these per turn. You could then use a spell card if it benefited you, or set a trap card face down, and then you would basically end your turn unless you wanted to enter the battle phase to attack your opponent. And that was basically all you really could do in the early days. Compare that to now, where your deck is an outlier if it can't special summon like 10 to 15 times in a single turn, because you can get unlimited special summons in a turn, and decks have been building around getting as many of these out as possible over the years. Some decks will even allow you to skirt around the one normal summon rule, and you can normal summon up to 8 or 9 times in a turn. The game is in this state now because cards have had to become more and more powerful over the years to keep the interest of the players. In those trading card games, a way that you can prevent your cards from just having to become more and more powerful over the years is by using a revolving format. This is what Magic the Gathering and Pokemon will use. After a certain amount of time after a set is released, you can no longer use that set. This is not only a way to sell future sets of cards, but it ensures that if they accidentally release something that was way too powerful, it would just become obsolete after time. While this certainly hasn't completely stopped the power creep of Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, it has certainly made it quite a bit slower than maybe it would have been if they hadn't implemented such a set rotation rule. And while Yu-Gi-Oh! Took the power creep route instead, it's not as if there weren't cards that were stupidly overpowered in the game's infancy. Pot of Greed is a good example of this. You simply draw 2 cards from its effect, but this is a very strong effect in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this card has existed since the very first set of the trading card game. The effect of the card is so good that there have been several spin-offs that have had very negative effects for using them, but they are still used anyway. But overall, the power creep in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has led to the game being a lot more fast-paced. You usually win on the first or second turn, but this doesn't have a 100% negative impact on the game experience itself because your opponent will also be able to have all of these powerful cards. But we've gone over power creep and how it's affected a different game. What about Dauntless? Dauntless has taken steps to avoid power creeping, but there are certain things that have been power crept anyway. Build perk summaries, for example, have been power crept. A build from 2019 isn't going to be the same as a build from 2022 here. Evasive Fury, for example, is still certainly playable in today's game, but it has lost a lot of favor as a sell over the years. It used to be a staple in builds because all you had to do was dodge an attack to gain attack speed. But easier methods of gaining attack speed or having more consistent attack speed have been implemented. When the sell version of Discipline came out, you were locked to having 50% or less HP. As a result of that, Wild Frenzy became a free, constant source of attack speed, so there was really no use for Evasive Fury at that point. When Wild Frenzy was changed to Assassin's Frenzy, there was a debate between the two, but with other advancements in power creep since then, I would argue that breaking apart on Behemoth in casual play at least is actually easier than dodging an attack. But in terms of a full-on meta build, even when Wild Frenzy was changed to Assassin's Frenzy, Evasive Fury wasn't really looked at. And that was because of Catalyst. If you were using tonics already, then you were gaining attack speed, damage, and lantern charge generation, or stagger damage or wound damage, whichever third tonic you were using, all of that from just one cell. So it's more practical to use Catalyst in your choice of build rather than Evasive Fury. And that's really all the attack speed you actually needed. And other perks have received that same treatment over the years, so we basically now have a select number of perks that can be used in a meta build. Another thing that has seen power creep is unique effects. And you would have to go by the elements on this one because some have gotten better while others have remained the same. Boreas used to be the only real contender for Frost unique effects, but then we got the Pangar unique effect, which became like the overall meta for a while. And then after some nerfs to that and other things, we've got the Frostwolf Wolf unique effect for the Frost unique effects, which is not only the Frost unique effect meta, but is the overall meta, or at least close to it. With the opposite end of that being Blaze unique effects, where Hellion has basically been the meta for several years at this point, with Charog taking some small victories here and there. Theoretically, the Phalanx UE could be the best of all of these, but it's just way too impractical to actually use. And the Lanterns even were power crept at this point, with Revenant and Discipline and these cooldown Lanterns being stronger than the previous Lanterns that we used to have, even when there wasn't a cooldown on them. But things having been power crept isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when things are new and good, they become really interesting. But if they're not really that good, then to a degree they are much less interesting. The recent Fenrir unique effect, for example, it's mechanically one of the most interesting unique effects we have, but it's just kind of bad, to the point where I don't even think I've used it to kill a behemoth, like not even a lesser Embermane, because the video I did about it I was in the training grounds. Theoretically, the motion value of the unique effect really isn't even that bad, but it wasn't going to be crazy strong to warrant me actually trying it out, to the point where I still haven't yet. If it released with like triple its motion value, now you're talking, and it wouldn't even be like that broken. Maybe on repeaters it would be, but at least it would be new and interesting instead of just new and not very good. And at this point in Dauntless, when we have new and not good gear, people will just take to not engaging with the new content and just reforging instead, especially because of how long it took to actually craft and power search things from Fenrir, even when you were dedicating massive amounts of time to it. So to a certain degree, Dauntless would benefit from power creeping the new gear releases to actually incentivize people to go out and get them. But because this is a PvE action game, this means the environment is going to be a lot weaker if you just come out with better and better gear each time. It would be weaker unless, of course, you decide to power creep the environment as well. We already had an example where we had to power creep the Dauntless Trial Behemoths to make them actually survive for some amount of time, and even after that, we are now living in a world with 35-second Pangar times. But people have been asking for higher level hunting grounds such as the Blazeworks for a while now. The people who are actually looking for a challenge out of the game have even been asking for maybe like level 30 behemoths here. And some people think heroic escalation's too easy, so give them a heroic plus escalation if you need to. But does Dauntless necessarily want or need that degree of power creep? I don't think it necessarily needs overall unchecked power creep, but what I think it does need is a shake up in the meta from time to time. The Frost Wolf unique effect has been one of the go-to unique effects since it's released. And since then, pretty much this entire year, we haven't gotten a stronger unique effect than that. While yes, other weapons and unique effects will be more useful depending on the situation, you still can't help but feel the weapon meta has gotten kind of stale since then. And the cells here as well. Pulse has probably been the last relevant cell that released. Like Invigorated and Aegis have been fun for non-meta builds, but there hasn't really been anything to shake up the actual meta. But how can you shake things up in the meta from time to time while avoiding permanent power creep, or at least controlling it? I do have a suggestion for that, and maybe it's not the best solution, but it is an attempted solution. I'll just use the weapon unique effects here for an example. Currently there are two levels of the unique effects, the power surge version and the non-power surge version. But what if we were to make a boosted or seasonal version of a unique effect? Say for the 1.12 update, let's give the Hellion unique effect a plus 100 boost to its unique effect damage. Or if we want to get really spicy, we could 2 or 3x a unique effect's damage. But this boosted version of the unique effect is not permanent, and say by the 1.12.3 patch, it would be reverted. And then some other unique effect gets a chance to get boosted and become the meta. And when new weapons release, for example, they could release in this boosted state to incentivize us to get them and play with them, and then come down to earth to a more reasonable level for its general power surge status. This would mean one weapon at a time is insanely power crept, changing up the meta for however long it is, but as a trade-off, you don't have to keep coming out with stronger and stronger unique effects. You could just make the unique effects the strongest when they are in their boosted state. And they wouldn't even have to do like a ton of extra coding work for this. You'd literally just go into the unique effects and change a number. And you'd just be doing that every few patches. So I don't think Dauntless as a whole needs power creep, but I do think it needs some sort of system like this to shake up the meta every now and then. And that's just my idea of maybe how they could go about that. Do you guys maybe have an idea like this that avoids or limits power creep, but would still give you powerful items to be excited about? If you do, let me know in the comments down below. But that's going to be it for this one, guys. Be sure to drop a like for me and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and get yourself a pumpkin head shirt over at TheMrTrails.store, code PC10 for 10% off. That's it for this one, guys. I have been Trevor, I go by TheMrTrails, and I will catch you guys next time.